as I have outlined here, the teaser, the meat of the thesis, and the beautifier next. So the structure and connectivity of a thesis. This is something that is extremely important. Sections should be properly linked and interwoven. The title must tie with the abstract. You do not give a title that do not get properly expanded in the abstract. The methods and results will tie with the discussion. If they do not tie, then it's not good. The objectives must tie with the conclusion. Now, this is something that a lot of theses are lacking. The objectives is written in chapter 1. The conclusion is commonly written in chapter 5. Usually, students, when they write this thesis, they forget to tie the conclusion with the objectives. Now, when they forget to do that deliberately, when they do not do the tying of the conclusion with the objectives in a deliberate manner, then that is not going to be making a very, very tight thesis. Yeah? Figures and tables must complement each other. Yeah, they must complement the discussion, they must complement each other, and references must be written correctly and coherently. Okay, Puan Salina, boleh mute kan tak? Puan Salina, can you mute? Thank you. Thank you very much. So, these are the structure and connectivity of a thesis that usually an examiner will be looking at. They want to know if the student actually, when he writes or she writes the thesis, she actually has a good framework of the whole thesis. The teaser, which I said, the title, abstract, objective, scope, the meat, the beautifier. Now, about the teaser, are you tickled by the teaser? Do you feel excited by the teaser? Yeah, it must be the teaser, your title, your abstract, objective, scope, and limitation must be informative, must be on point, must be attractive and effective. It must give an accurate glimpse of the thesis content. The content of the thesis must be presented in summary in the teaser. Now, after going through a good teaser, an evaluator would be feeling like this. He would have a pretty good idea what story is presented in the thesis. The examiner would be able to imagine what would be dished out in the chapters of methodology, results, and discussion, because if the examiner is also in that field, when he reads the title, abstracts, objectives, and scope and limitation, he would be able to imagine, they will employ this methodology, they will have this kind of result, or they will be discussing it like this. Yeah, he would be able to have an idea of what is going to be the next that he will meet in the thesis. He would be able to speculate the main points of the conclusion, and he would be excited to read and enjoy the whole thesis. So if the teaser is an effective teaser, then this is what the examiner would feel. So students writing must be having all this in mind. Am I going to be able to give this kind of feeling to anyone reading this thesis? Yeah. So next, I'm going to talk about the meat of the thesis, which is the methodology, the results, discussion, and the conclusion. The meat of the thesis must be correct, must be robust, airtight, substantial. They must support and strengthen each other. It gives the whole and complete story of the research. Yeah. So this is the very, very important part of your thesis. Yeah. When going through this part, the evaluator should assess that the methodologies employed are suitable to achieve the objectives, that the results are substantial, that the results are presented logically and systematically, The data sets are discussed well, correctly, thoroughly, coherently, and that the candidate is well versed with the underlying theories and display mastery and confidence when discussing the results. And the novelty of the finding will have to be apparent when reading this meat of the thesis. And there must be a contribution to new knowledge. The bottom line is the examiner will ask himself or herself, am I convinced? Am I convinced? So to convince the examiners or to convince the readers, students would have to be able to produce something like this. Yeah, not earth shaking. Definitely, you don't have to be doing something that is rocket of the science of the moon or something, but it has to be well presented, correctly presented. You must display your mastery and your confidence in that subject. Yeah, so that is the meat of the thesis. Is the meat substantial? Is it satisfying? So that is the question for the biggest and strongest part of your thesis. And I'm going to go next into the beautifier. The beautifier, does it take your breath away? When you see something beautiful, you gasp. Beautiful. Yep. So does the beautifier make you do that? Does it take your breath away? The introduction, the literature review, the format and languages, references, supplementary data. Evaluate that the examiner will have to evaluate that each section of the thesis fulfills its purpose clearly and concisely. The examiner will be looking for these things. In the introduction, the examiner will have to see the introduction that reveals the candidate's mastery of all the relevant overarching principles. Yeah, whatever principle, fundamental knowledge that you have to know about that subject must be displayed in the introduction. Literature review should display the breadth, the depth, and the currentness of the candidate's knowledge on and around the subject, and it should lead and link nicely into the meat part. The literature review would have to prepare the examiner into reading the methodology. If you're talking about something beautiful, but it's something totally not related to what you are reporting in the chapter of methodology and results and discussion, then literature review is irrelevant. Yeah, you must uh, write something that is relevant to the subject or to the things that you are going to be reporting. Format and language. So candidates should put a lot of care and effort. The spelling, the sentence structure, and the format, just follow the format. You have to keep the evaluator sweet. I have gone through some theses that are quite strong. The meat is good, but the language is, my goodness, the English. I end up doing a lot of my giving a lot of my time in correcting the English of that thesis. So that makes me mad. It doesn't make me sweet on the candidate. So that is dangerous. The references, what gets mentioned in the text must tally 100% with what is in the list at the back. So if you mention Ahmad et al. In your text, you must have Ahmad et al. At the back in the reference, because the examiner would want to refer to that the references that you mentioned. And supplementary data. It is a definite plus if relevant data is arranged sensibly and systematically. In my field, if you are putting infrared in Appendix A, you are putting infrared according to maybe the series of compounds that you are discussing accordingly in sequence, so the examiner can go through it in a good system. There must be a system that you put when you are putting your appendices, for example. So the beautifier must be able to do all this. So be very, very careful if you are a student when you are writing all this, yeah. Now, after you have written, after you have read the thesis that you are given the responsibility to evaluate, you must report the evaluation. What I always do is I have a little notebook that I keep together with the thesis that I am evaluating, and in my notebook I will note on what page, what figure, or which line, and I will write using my handwriting my concern about that or my comment that I want. And after I've finished the whole thesis, I would have probably, I don't know, a few pages full in my notebook, and I'm going to sort out my little notes, handwritten notes, in a formal written report. Yeah, I would check the forms provided by universities, graduate school. Usually each university will have its own format. Generally, they will have similar things, but they would have their own format. So you follow that university's format. Do not use a different format because it will actually make some kind of confusion later on. You have to give clear and specific comments that could assist the candidate to make improvements and correction. Now, this is what is important. You must comment with the frame of mind to improve, not comment to condemn. Yeah? Evaluators may also write comments on the thesis itself, drawing attention to them in the written formal report. If you are making scribbles on a diagram, for example, put in your report, please refer to page so-and-so in the thesis on the figure 20. Then the student will refer to what you have written in there. And in addition, evaluators may attach a list of comments highlighting the relevant page numbers in the thesis. So this is an example of things that are requested by the university to evaluate: the appropriateness of the thesis title, research problem and hypothesis, literature review, objectives, and so on and so forth. In the end, they would want you to give a comment on the overall accomplishment, the merits of the thesis, and the demerits of the thesis. This is very, very common. It may not come in this form, but the content is always like this, something similar. This is an example of a thesis report that I have written in year 2012. In my report, I made sure on the header I put who the student name is, what university, what date, whose report is this. Yeah. So, for example, when commenting on the appropriateness of the thesis title, I write something like this. I said, the title of the thesis is acceptable. However, the use of the word novel in the title may be somewhat arguable, since the framework of the complexes presented in the thesis may not necessarily be newly discovered. I would like to suggest the use of the word new instead of novel, use the word new. So you see, I'm not saying that what I'm doing is absolutely correct and everybody must follow this, but the general notes here that I would like to remind examiners is that you must mind your language. You must comment politely. Remember, this person has spent 3, 4, 5 years of his life to produce this thesis. You must respect that. Don't be harsh. If you want to make a point in a polite way. That will actually be desirable. In Malay, we have a saying. It says, "Ular menyusur di akar, tak akan hilang bisanya." Yeah? A snake that slithers on lowly tree roots will not lose its venom. You don't have to be nasty to make an impact. You can be nice and make a very, very big impact. Yeah? And it is good practice to furnish your report with relevant information like what I did at the top here. So that is one example of a beginning of a thesis report. For the literature, this is something that I that I wrote. I usually don't list down each and every single mistake. I just make a comment and I say, please see the notes I wrote on the thesis. I found the papers lean heavily on older publications, so I want the student to go onto newer papers, methodology, things like that. You make comments and you make suggestions for examining to assist the student to improve that thesis. Hopefully, after the Viva, it will be just a minor correction. The overall accomplishment, you just do the volume. This is what I commented on that student in Unimas. The volume of work presented is very satisfactory, and there are many new compounds successfully characterized up to the X-ray single crystal. Well, he presented up to 12, I think, single crystal. Analysis interpretation. After going through what he did, I commented, I make a summary. However, I found that lumping together important spectral data for compound does not help in comparison. There are no proper tabulation of selected important data. So you make your own suggestion how that thesis can be improved. But you have to be open. You do not stick to your own framework and say you do it like this or otherwise you fail. No, that's not the way we go in. We go in with the frame of mind to make it better. Yeah, and be open. Be open to you celebrate differences. Celebrate differences as long as it presents the strength of the thesis. I have some general comments that when I went through this, I have gone through the thesis and penciled in the corrections needed to be done on the pages, and some accompanied. This was I like using pink stickers, markers, whatever that can be easily noticeable. I make things like this so that the student can actually see what is it that's bothering me. Points to remember, first of all, give due credit. If you see that he has done a good job, you just say, yeah, it's a good job. However, there is something that needs to be improved. You come in with the aim to be constructive. The point of evaluation is certainly not to terrorize or belittle the candidate. Be specific in your comments so candidate can address the weakness well. Remember, only recorded comments and suggestions will be addressed. If you say something that you do not write, it's not going to get done. Yeah. So if it bothers you, write it down to be improved. Otherwise, you must hold your peace. Yeah. Notes for example, what are the merits of the thesis, what are the merits of the thesis. The date of the Viva-Voce for the student that I was evaluating was exactly on the last day of the third year of his PhD candidacy. So he actually submitted not maybe about 2.5 years after he began his PhD. So he had presented a substantial amount of work in his thesis, but the presentation was a bit weak. There was a lot of grammatical error. There was a lot of in Malay we say celaru. It's very lumped together. You don't see flow, but do not penalize the candidate for the weakness in the beautifier and the teaser if the meat is satisfactory. If the work is satisfactory, there is strength in the work, there is good findings, do not unnecessarily penalize the student because the beautifier is not good enough, the teaser is not exciting enough. You just ask because the internal examiner for this particular student, the internal examiner from the same university gave fail to the student. And I said, why do you fail him? His work is substantial. It's only his presentation in the thesis that's not properly done. So we get him to make the presentation better. Do not fail him. So yes, luckily the the chairman listened to me during the Viva, and the student did not fail the PhD, but he did have to do a lot of repair work in his thesis. Yeah. So the point that I want to tell young examiners are, do not get too carried away. Do not unnecessarily fail a student. Remember, you do not penalize the candidate for the weakness is in chapters that are not the meat. If the meat is good, no matter how ugly is the beautifier, no matter how boring is the teaser, don't fail him. Just get him to address that thing. Yeah? Okay, that is the important point. So after you finish evaluating your student, after you wrote the report, come the Viva-Voce. Now, Viva-Voce can be good, can be bad, and can be very ugly. So welcome to part 2 of my talk. I hope I'm not taking too much time. For part 2 of this talk, I would like to do some sharing so that everyone would be able to distinguish the roles of examiners, the internal and external, the role of a chairperson in a Viva, the role of supervisor in a Viva, and you would be able to, hopefully after you listen to what I have to say today, you would be able to carry out the role of an examiner, either internal or external, effectively during a Viva-Voce session. So let's see. Viva-Voce, what is it and why? Yeah, what is a Viva? We always say, what is a Viva and why? Why do we have to have a Viva? Now, a Viva-Voce is a Latin phrase literally meaning live voice. Yeah, listen. Yeah, it's a live presentation. In the academic context, it is an oral examination, especially in a defense of a thesis. A Viva can be a chance to save the candidate who has produced a weak thesis, kind of weak. It can be a helpful and a nurturing process for everyone involved, not only for the student, even for the examiner, even for the supervisor. Yeah? The supervisor, I as a supervisor who have sat through many of my students' Viva-Voce sessions, I forever continuously learning from all of the sessions. I found the Viva sessions very helpful, very nurturing. It is an opportunity for a healthy academic discourse and networking. Why is a Viva-Voce important? It is important to explore how the candidate's research make a contribution to the knowledge. We want to establish this. We want to examine that the candidate's ability to defend and clarify the thesis, helping to ensure that the work is the candidate's own work. Because usually, hopefully it doesn't happen. Usually, sometimes we hear people saying, oh, that's not his work, actually, he's just presenting somebody else's work or something like that. The Viva-Voce is to ensure that what is presented is the person's own work, and ultimately to ensure that the student is worthy of a doctorate and a master's degree or a master's degree, is worthy of being called a doctor. Yeah? As a rough estimate, this is my own estimate, about 80% of candidates pass with minor correction. So don't worry, those who are going to go through your Viva, don't worry. If you put in all the effort, 80% you're going to pass with minor correction. Some 10% have to make major correction. 5%, very small amount, fail outright. I have one case where the candidate had to rewrite and represent one case because that was totally cannot be helped, and 5% will be with no alteration. Very lucky, these people had no alteration. I had to do one alteration after my Viva, which was a spelling mistake in the acknowledgement section. So very lucky in a way that my Viva went very well, 1 hour and 15 minutes, and with one minor, very minor spelling mistake correction in the acknowledgement. So who is who in a Viva session? Now, chairperson, you have a chairperson, you have internal examiner, you have external examiner, and you have coordinator, and of course you have the student. Notice that a supervisor's presence is not compulsory. Yeah, these people are compulsory. Now, a chairperson is usually an academic member of staff of the home faculty of or the home university. It is typically a person of academic standing, usually a professor, but not expected to have read the full thesis. The chairperson is not expected to have read the full thesis, but he must have actually gone through the summary of the reports given by the internal and external. He need not to be trained in the same field, but he must have a wide experience in the area. That's the chairperson. Who is the internal examiner? Internal examiner is an appointed academic from the home faculty or the home university. He has read the thesis and has submitted a written report. An external examiner is an appointed academic from a different university. He has read and submitted a written report. Usually we have a coordinator from the Office of Graduate School or the faculty, and we have the student. Remember, the student, even if the student has somehow a knowledge who is his external, who is his internal, there should not be any contact between the candidate and the examiners after the examiner's appointment until the date of the Viva-Voce. They cannot have any kind of contact because that would be unethical. Now, the role of a chairperson. Now, if you are appointed to be a chairperson, it is actually an honor. I always enjoy being a chairperson if I'm given the opportunity. You are expected to introduce everyone, putting everybody at ease. Yeah, that is the role of a chairperson, just to make sure everybody is feeling good at the beginning of the session, outline the structure and format of the session, ensure fair speaking opportunities for all. Don't let just one person take the mic. Everybody must speak, keep control of the discussion and observe reasonable time, chair the post-Viva-Voce discussion with the examiners, assisting examiners in formulation of a recommendation. The chairperson do not give a recommendation, but he is expected to assist examiners to come up with a agreed recommendation with a pass or fail or whatever. The chairperson must ensure that examiners complete and sign the relevant forms at the end of the Viva-Voce. That is clerical, really, but just make sure all the documents are signed, all the everything is handed in. The chair is not expected to actively join in the questioning session. Yeah, the chair is just observing and making sure everything is in order. Chair can only intervene if there appears to be bias, misconduct, bullying, or unfairness. Chair can intervene if the examiners are diverting from the agreed format of the Viva-Voce in such a manner that will disadvantage the candidate, and the session is progressing in a way that could compromise the university's academic standard. So that is the chair. It can intervene when such situation occurs. Actions which a chair might take will include call a temporary halt to the meeting if things are getting out of control. Just stop the meeting for a while. He can hold a private discussion with the examiners, private discussion with the candidate if things are getting very, very distraught and he needs to, put things in order. He needs to have a private discussion, and he can do so. And he can end the examination if things really, really can't be saved. And that is very, very exceptional. It doesn't happen very often. Now, the role of examiners. Before the Viva, examiners have very, very important role. They have to go through before the Viva, go through the thesis entirely, submit independent report on the thesis. During the Viva, the examiners will ask questions to the candidates, assist in determining and verifying whether the results, arguments, and information presented in the thesis and as defended in the Viva-Voce examination meet the academic standard relevant to the degree pursued, and make sure that they are truly the outcome of the candidate's own work, and to make recommendation for improvement of the thesis. That is during the Viva. And after the Viva, before giving the results, the examiners are expected to convene in the presence of the chairperson in deciding what award should be given to the person, to the candidate, what corrections need to be done, and to determine how long is the correction period, and to determine who checks the corrected thesis. If applicable, usually people will agree that it is the internal examiner's duty to check the corrected thesis. And finally, to produce a joint report on the Viva-Voce examination and a joint recommendation. So that is the role of the examiner. Next, I'm going to go briefly on the role of the supervisor during the Viva-Voce. Now, supervisor may or may not attend the Viva-Voce examination, but usually I make a point to attend all my students' Viva-Voce. But I can be excluded. Examiners may request that the supervisor is or are not present. So if the examiners feel they're not comfortable to have the supervisor, that they're within their rights to say, no, can you please sit this one out? Yeah. If the examiner is present, a supervisor acts only as an observer and may make a comment only with permission or upon invitation from the examiners and the chairperson. So be quiet, observe, and talk only when spoken to. Speak only when spoken to. Yeah? If the examiner is not present in the Viva-Voce, it is recommended that the supervisor is available and contactable at the time of the Viva-Voce. You know, sit next to your phone, be on the next door, or if you are not in town, make sure you are internet ready. Yeah? In case the examiners feel that his or her presence in the Viva is required, for example, maybe to give support to the student. Remember, you have done all that you can as a supervisor. It is time to let go, because it is time for your student to defend himself or herself and his work. So you just let it go, say Frozen. Let it go, yeah? Sorry about that. Okay, when we have disagreements and disputes about the candidates, disagreement between examiners should be resolved by the examiners on the basis of detailed discussion on specific academic points arising from the examination, and a joint decision should be reached. You must resolve any disagreement face to face. Any disagreement between external and internal examiner, you will have particular weight given on the view of the external. So external is more, has more right. If there is any disagreement or dispute, usually the view of the external examiner is much more weightier than the view of the internal examiner. Where there are two external examiners, particular weight should be given to the chairperson. Now this is where the chairperson steps in when there is the disagreement and dispute. In the case where examiners recommend that a PhD degree is not awarded and that the candidate not permitted to submit for re-examination, this is a very, very sad case, the examiners may subsequently consider whether or not the work is sufficient for the award of a master level degree. We can do that. And if they agree that a master's level award would be merited for a PhD candidate, then a separate recommendation may be made in writing to the effect. Hopefully, this will never happen to anyone we know. Now, Viva-Voce, the good Viva-Voce. What is the criteria of a good Viva-Voce? First of all, it does not take too long unnecessarily. It doesn't have to take 3, 4, 5 hours. A good Viva-Voce, I don't know, mine was 1 hour and 15 minutes, and that was long enough for me, I thought. So the Viva-Voce, this is where the chairman will have to play a big role. Do not allow it to become too long. Unless everybody is having such a good time discussing the result and everybody is happy and jolly in there talking, they can talk many, many hours about it. But don't let it take too long. A good Viva-Voce is well managed and mediated by the chairperson. A good Viva-Voce challenges the candidate enough to test his knowledge and mastery of his thesis, but it does not make him feel bullied. Never bully your candidate. That is not good. And a good Viva-Voce is a gratifying scholarly discussion for everybody present. Now, at the end of a good Viva-Voce session, the examiners will feel satisfied and convinced. The candidate will feel that he has a clear idea how to do the thesis corrections and eager to get going on it. And the supervisors will feel accomplished. So that is an indicator of a good Viva-Voce. What about the bad and the ugly Viva-Voce? There are many possible reasons why a Viva-Voce can turn bad and ugly. It can be caused by any of the people in that session. The candidate may not be well prepared. That will make a very bad Viva-Voce. The candidate submits different versions of his thesis. Now, this has happened. When the candidate submitted a thesis for evaluation, he submitted a version A, for example. And he had 2 months, 3 months to wait before the Viva. So he made improvement to his thesis between the submission and the Viva. And he brought in his new thesis, new improved thesis. So that's going to make a very bad Viva-Voce because the examiners will feel violated. They spend so much of their time, so much energy and effort on a version of the thesis, and the presentation is on a different version of the thesis. Never ever do this, yeah, okay? So that's gonna make a bad Viva session. Now, examiners may also cause a bad and ugly Viva session. The examiner has not read the thesis properly. That's going to be bad. The examiner goes on an ego trip. He keep on saying, oh, I think this is this, I. When somebody talks too much in the word I, me, that's not an ego, big ego person. That shouldn't happen in a Viva. In a Viva, it is about the candidate. It's not about the examiner. Remember that. It is about the candidate. It's never about the examiner. Examiners are there to assist, make it better. Some examiners will be off the wall, quirky, maverick. They don't play by the rules. So that can make things go very bad in the examination. I have gone through something similar to this. Now, the chairperson can be also the cause of the bad and ugly. The chairperson fails to control the session, that's going to be bad. And the chairperson becomes the third or the fourth examiner. I mean, the examiners will be asking questions to the student and the chairperson comes in and asks more and more and more. That's not fair. That's not going to be acceptable. Chairperson ought not ask questions beyond an acceptable level. If I was being a chairperson, I would refrain from asking. I probably would nudge and hint, but I would refrain from asking. And the supervisor. If the supervisor is present, he can also make the session very bad. When the supervisor does not prepare the student well, this is what I and my students before the Viva or before any session presentation, even for conference, I would go through every single slide with my students just to make sure that he knows what he writes about and he is on top of everything. And it is going to be bad also if the supervisor answers most of the question. The examiner asks the student, the supervisor answer. Ask the student, supervisor answer. That's bad. That's bad. Don't do that. Okay? Viva-Voce, the ugly. This is a few scenario depicted after an ugly or after a few ugly Viva-Voce session. One candidate who in fact passed with minor correction reported when he left the Viva, he felt as if, oh, it's a she felt as if she had been hit on the head. And she burst into tears with the sense that her years of research had been a waste of time now. This is a bad one. Yeah? We do not want a student to feel like this. I have had a Viva session when my student also passed with a minor correction, but it was a 3-hour session and it was a nightmare. So that was a bad one. A nightmare because of the examiner. Now, this is a comment by an examiner. As an examiner, I was involved with one Viva where we had to fail the student. The Viva was to see if we could get something out of it, but we could not. It still sends a shiver down my spine when I talk about it. So examiners are very much affected by this. They try to help, but if they cannot help and has to fail the student, that is actually a big failure. We as examiners feel the sadness as well, but nothing can be done. If it's too bad, we just have to do it. Yes. So this is my final slide. As a parting word, a PhD thesis would not win you a Nobel Prize. Remember this, students. Yeah, your PhD thesis will not win you a Nobel Prize. This is a Nobel. This is not a novel. It should be a Nobel. It is just a training ground to make you a credible researcher. Your PhD is a training ground. So don't feel too pressured. Yeah. And it takes a village to raise a child, we know this, but it takes a whole university to produce a PhD graduate. And my own feeling is it is always better to judge leniently than to judge unfairly. So those are my parting words. I thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you. Done. So oh, are we here?
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Prof. Hada, for your inspiring and I think very valuable presentation for us. Okay, now I would like to open the floor for question and answer sessions. Okay, okay, I already have a few questions. I think about 9 questions.
Oh,
Okay,
too many.
9 questions here.
That's a lot.
I think I will ask only 5 questions here. Okay, this one comes from Niza Zafar from Pakistan. He's a PhD candidate.
Hi,
The
Miza.
question is, can you give some advice on the length of introduction and literature review? Yeah.
Okay.
What is the 50 pages or 40 pages or something? Just give. Okay.
Okay, there is no hard and fast rule on this one, but even the length of a thesis, there is no hard and fast rule about that. I've seen very thin thesis, I've seen very thick thesis, I've seen 2-volume thesis. Yeah, but I would say a safe bet would be your introduction may, if your thesis is about 200 pages, that is an average. Do you agree, Dr. Fauzi? 200
Yeah.
pages for a PhD thesis?
Yeah, sufficient. Yeah.
Sufficient.
Adequate. Yeah.
I would say 10% would be introduction. So that would be about 20 pages.
Yeah.
And I would say about 30% would be for your literature review maximum. Don't go
Yeah.
beyond that. Yeah, maybe about 50 pages, 60 pages, even 60 is quite a lot, is quite sufficient. So about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I agree with you. I think we go to the next question because we had this one. Okay, thank you for the answer. I think Nida, you can get the answer. Thank you, Prof. Hada. Second question, I give this one. Next is from Kairia Murad. It is possible for us to contact you with the examiner after the after the Viva exam.
Oh yes. Is it possible for candidate to contact
Yes.
examiners after the Viva session? Yes, yes, yes.
Okay,
Can.
okay,
It's
Kairia.
possible.
Possible. Okay, you get the answer
Yes.
already. Next question
Yes.
from Rosdiana Sukardi. Yeah. Now,
Oh, this is friend from Sabah. Yes.
now Viva-Voce is done online. How can it be effective in helping the candidates and also from the examiner perspective?
Oh,
How did this
I
online?
I have I have gone through one or two online Viva-Voce and I truly enjoyed it. There's no problem, PM Ross, because we have rules that the students have to follow. The student has to be alone in a room by himself, so we depend on the integrity of the student to abide by. He will not need to have a room full of his mom and dad and grandma and children and everything in the room. No, no, that's not allowed. He has to be alone in the room by himself. Yes, if possible, we request that the candidate. I have also seen a candidate who arranged with the library to provide him with a suitable venue to present, and then it's totally enjoyable. PM Rose, Viva-Voce online. It's I don't see any problem in it.
Okay.
Everybody is doing what they should be doing well. Less
Thank you.
stress, really.
Okay. Next question. Okay, this one. There are many questions. I think it's I try to answer. I hope you can answer as many as possible. I try. Okay, this one is very interesting. From Aina. I'm Aina from postgraduate student from dental faculty. I think
Hi,
UITM.
Aina.
Okay, and then she would like to know, may I know which references style is suitable for thesis write up for thesis?
Well, I think in UITM we always use the APA style, the American Psychological Association style, the APA style. If you go to IPSIS website,
Okay.
you will see a few guidelines there on what kind of reference style that you can use. So we use APA style.
Okay.
I think that would be the most suitable.
So thank you. Thank you. I think, Aina, I think you get it, the answer from Prof. Ada. Okay, now another one. Nur Afika. As young academics, how can we promote ourselves to be chosen or nominated as an internal or external examiner?
Okay, this is a very very relevant question. You are eager to experience your first evaluation, internal or external. Now, to promote yourself, first of all, you must show credibility. You must show that you are able and you are competent within that field. And this is where networking is very, very important.
Okay.
Make friends, find people. I mean, I mean, if you are grade 52, usually you do not get to be appointed as external examiner yet.
Okay.
grade 52. Am I right?
Yes. Because I think,
Yes, if
right.
you are grade 54 associate professor, you can be appointed as external examiner for master students,
Okay.
having had a doctorate yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
And if you have been appointed full professor, then you can be appointed as a PhD external examiner. Yeah, that
Okay.
that depends on universities, but
Yeah.
that is the common guide.
Yeah.
So what actually happens is like this: we have internal and external examiners. Usually, the way that a faculty would strategize to promote the young ones
Yeah.
is to appoint a senior external examiner, a full professor, somebody who is big in the field, and then they would appoint an internal examiner from the young lecturers that they have at the faculty. So faculty can play a big role.
Okay.
Hi, Sheha, I see you there. Faculties can play a big role in promoting and, of course,
Acting.
networking. Yeah, you. If you want to be seen, you have to shine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
If
you.
you want to be seen, you have to shine.
Okay, this one, Prof. Another question from Khairiah Murad. If
Yes, sir.
someone unfortunately get the major correction, it is possible for them to get GOT, graduate on time. I think graduate on time.
Oh,
It is possible for them to GOT, graduate on time.
it all depends on the student.
The
It all
students,
depends
yeah.
on the
Okay.
student. Yeah. If you can say you submit within the minimum candidature 2 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Minimum candidature, if I'm not mistaken, for PhD is 2 years. You submit.
Okay.
After you submit, the examiners feel that your thesis is not yet sufficient or your knowledge is not yet mature. So
Okay.
they give you a major.
Major.
Alhamdulillah lah, kita tak ndak lah kan.
Hopefully minor correction.
They give you a major. If you are still within that 3 years or 3.5 years, GOT is 4 years, is it? 48 months, I think.
3.5 years.
Yeah, I am not sure. Look
Yeah.
into your academic regulation for your postgraduate school,
Okay.
and yes, the answer is yes. You can still GOT. GOT depends on time. When do you get your degree? If you get your degree within that specific time, then you can get GOT. I think your question is, will he be, even if he finish on time, will he be penalized? I don't know. I don't think so. I've never experienced this. I'm sorry, I can't give you a good answer.
Okay, this one, I think from Dr. Muzami Muhd.
Hey, Dr. Muzamil, kenapa?
As an examiner, may I know how do we control or buffer the things that we know, our expertise, we know, to the presented data by candidates during the Viva. So it won't undermine other people's works. I believe this is quite important, especially if they have wrongly analyzed the raw data. Do you get the question, Prof?
Yes, I do get the question.
Okay.
When the examiner detected a wrong method of analysis or wrong methodology or whatever, how do you point that out without hurting other people, without undermining other people? Because the student will have been advised by supervisor over the past few years. Yeah, that is a question. You just have to say it politely, Muzamil.
Okay.
You just have to say it politely and refer to the relevant references. It's always safe to bring your own references and say, it is interesting. I find this in this reference and they analyze it differently. Why don't you try this analysis?
All right. Okay.
Maybe that way.
Okay, quickly. Okay, I think it's those. I will. We have your some question. Yeah, many questions. I think 2 or 3 questions here. I think we are. I can send the question to Prof Hada, and then Prof Hada will send back by WhatsApp through you. Yeah,
I know the people. If I know the people.
I think Prof Hada, you can contact them. Okay. Now I think already 1:15. Okay. I think we can stop our presentation, our session. Thank you very much, Prof Hada, actually appointing me as the moderator for your presentation. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much, Prof Hada. Nice.
Thank you, Dr. Fauzi. Thank you, Sharil. Thank you, Faculty of Applied Sciences, and thank you for everyone. I think at the peak, I got almost 350. What was the maximum number of participation just now? Almost 350. I don't know.
Yeah, I
So
think.
thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Those who come from within UiTM, those who come from our different universities in Malaysia, different universities in Pakistan, in Indonesia. Thank you very much for coming, and I'm very humbled by your presence. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Okay. Bye bye.
Friends, we can continue later. Hi, Nurul. Okay, bye, everyone. Thank you. Assalamualaikum. Take care. Keep safe.
Bye.
Hi, bye, Rosana. Rosana is the Vice Chancellor of the Women University in Pakistan. Hi, Rosana. Professor Roxana. We were together doing our PhD in Guildford all those years ago, and now Roxana is the Vice Chancellor in one of the universities in Pakistan. Thank you for gracing us with your presence, Roxana. Love you. Mwah.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Assalamualaikum.